Jeh Johnson, former Secretary of Homeland Security, joins us. Mary Harris, host of Slate Magazine's podcast, What's Next, and Mark McKinnon, former advisor to George W. Bush and John McCain. We only invite him because he's the best-dressed guest on this show. Jay, welcome back. 11th hour was late for you. In my long pitch of why I wanted to create the show, it was so Jeh Johnson can come back, and here you are.
I am so happy to be back here. I debuted with you at 11 p.m. and proud to debut with you today.
Okay, the president claims that the things are moving, the Strait of Hormuz is reopening. We have no idea if they are or not. But is the president bringing a foreign policy win to the G7 summit, or is it just a headline? Because people who actually know beyond the headlines are the participants at the G7.
He will certainly claim that he is bringing a huge success to the G7 intended for his base back home. To me, one of the many unusual things about this announcement, these negotiations, is that the president front loads the announcement before the deal is actually done. From a negotiation standpoint, you're signaling to your adversary that you're anxious for a deal on almost any terms. And it's also highly unusual to have a deal on certain terms, but leave to later the most critical aspects. It's a little like announcing, I'm going to sell my house, but we're going to figure out the sale price later. And we've heard this before from him. We're close to a deal. We're about to make a deal. And the Iranians sit back very calmly and coolly. And what is different, I think, this time is that even the Iranians are saying, yes, we have a deal. And the Pakistanis who've been in the middle are saying, yes, we have a deal. So we'll have to see what it looks like on paper.
Yeah, I mean, is it a deal? It's a memorandum of understanding.
Let's hope it is.
So what I find interesting about this is that this is another one of these games, it looks like to me. We're having an announcement of a deal for Monday morning market opening. It's supposed to be signed on Friday. That's when the market's closed for the week. This looks like something that we've seen before. The Strait is going to open when the Strait is going to open. When he first announced this deal, he said Strait's open. Then a few hours later, okay, Strait's going to open on Friday. We just don't know what this is. We don't have the text of it. We can't properly analyze it and what it means. And I think that's just really important to keep in mind. Given that on April 8th, Donald Trump said the Strait is going to be open. Here we are, months later. He's saying it again. Let's see what happens. Now, yeah, the signs are there that people are trying to get on board here. But to me, it looks like a birthday gift to Donald Trump to have this promotional thing to say that there is a deal. But we don't really know if there's a deal. And it really seems like a start, not an end. This is the beginning.
We are looking at Air Force One has now touched down. So for him, the show, the salesmanship, it all begins at the G7. Mark, can we talk about this new NBC News poll? Democrats leading by 5 points in the congressional preference. Are they making a case for themselves, right? Democrats need to focus on two things, right? Accountability of what the Trump administration is doing and affordability for the American people. Are they making that case, or is this voters moving away from Donald Trump?
Well, given all this going on and all this happened, Democrats should be up by 20. The fact that they're only up 5 is problematic. They're not unhappy with the Republicans. They're unhappy with Trump. They're unhappy with Democrats. They're in a bitter, foul mood. But the thing about the Iran deal that I would say is, I hope it happens. I hope what happens is best for the world and best for the United States, of course. But, my job is to look at these things politically. And if you ask, what does this mean for the politics of it? I think it's going to be really hard for Republicans to run and defend this deal. We have a saying in politics, if you're explaining, you're losing. And I'd much rather be on the other side of this, attacking the deal, because if you look at it and you say, how are we any better than we were before this started? And in fact, it's going to be really easy for Democrats to say, you know what's different? Iran has leverage over the Strait now. They didn't have that before. Thank you, Donald Trump.
And we've also spent billions and billions of dollars while we didn't extend health care subsidies.
But Democrats should take nothing for granted, because voters want to see them deliver too, and they don't believe Democrats either.
Let's talk about what the president did do this weekend, because he wasn't necessarily involved in this potential peace deal. He hosted this UFC fight at the White House. What is your take on this? Because a big priority for the president is to get young men back in the fold. He did a great job winning a whole lot of young men over in this last election. This, many people think, is a move to bring them back. And while some say this is distasteful, it's disgusting, why are you doing this on the South Lawn of the White House? Is that the question to be asking, or is this the president playing, you know, his smart brand of politics, go USA, winning back those voters? And what we should be talking about is, why is this happening? What are the conflicts of interest? How much did this cost? Because those are taxpayer dollars, aside from all of those companies with big old government contracts sponsoring it.
Yeah. So we were talking about this a bit beforehand. When I look at what's going on the South Lawn, on the ellipse, you know, the beer signs on the ellipse, I'm offended. As a former Obama guy who grew up in New York, I'm offended. But there's a whole segment of America that loves that, that is really into that.
And those are great, hardworking Americans.
And there's a great, honest, hardworking Americans. And so when we see a spectacle like that, I think you're right. We should focus our attention on the cost to taxpayers, the conflicts of interest, which will probably take years to untangle with the Trump family. But this is something that I've had to get used to when I look at what he's done to the White House, when I look at what he's doing to the East Wing, when I look at what he's done to the so-called Wall of Fame, the Corridor of Fame, when you walk from the residence to the Oval Office. To a lot of people, that's like sacred ground, you know, where you'd see JFK and his brother photographed during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And to see what he's done with that corridor, it's just, we're horrified. But a lot of America is into it, and it speaks to them. And if you're a Democrat, you can't put that aside. You have to focus on issues of affordability, gas prices, taxes, and so forth.
But so does Trump, right? So even if you're an American voter who's not offended by any of the things he's doing and you think it's badass and rad and cool, what you really care about is, do I have a good job? Can I afford health care? Do my kids go to a good school? So, yes, Democrats have to make that case. But the president, who's the person currently in office and controlling Congress, they ain't making that case.
That's exactly right. And that's why it was a great...
What'd you say?
That's exactly right.
All right, that's why you get invited back. Yeah.
But that was a great clip of the Hispanic woman in Chicago. But basically saying, when she netted it out, she said, what I really care about is they just seem to be caring more about what they're doing for themselves than for us. And listen, you're right about UFC. Democrats, be careful about denigrating the UFC. People love love UFC, particularly young
WWE,
male voters.
Yeah.
I just finished a documentary on Gen Z and what happened with those young voters, and we know that they've been falling off, but this is a way to get them back. And I was just thinking right now, I interviewed Charlie Kirk twice for this documentary. I just imagine what he would be doing with this UFC fight, sending out clips over TikTok and YouTube. So beware.
I guess what I'd say here is that I agree that there are plenty of people in the United States who love the UFC fighting, all that sort of stuff. What I think is interesting about this moment, because you're raising this issue of the money, right? Follow the money, where this is, it feels like corruption. I think the Democrats have this chance now, where last time around, when we had Kamala Harris running, there was a question of, do we talk about democracy or do we talk about kitchen table issues? And the thing is, they are related. The money, like the UFC fight, the fact that you had to stream it on Paramount, that
essentially pay-per-view, right?
Yes.
They did an event that was for the American people that you can watch basically on pay-per-view.
There's a material cost to Americans to this personalist regime. And the more that Democrats can point to that, I think the better off they'll be. These things are not separate.
That's a great point. $12,000 coins for the president, and that's making money off a big event instead of the event being for the people. And there's a difference between making money and extracting money, and that's what Donald Trump does.
But the thing is about this economy. Listen, we have 330 million people in this country. We don't have one economy. It's the most divided economy I can point to in our lifetime, right? So the surge in energy prices wiped out a year and a half of wage gains for the average American worker, right? That happened in the last 3 months. Yeah. What also happened in the last 3 days? We minted our first American trillionaire, and scores of others have become wealthier than we could ever imagine. And those Americans, those super wealthy Americans, have more influence over politics and direct policy than we've ever seen.
Correct.
So it's more complicated than ever when we talk about what the economic picture is here in the United States.
We have to constantly remind ourselves that swing voters who make the difference in elections are, irrespective of where they sit on the political ideological line, are deeply distrustful of government, frustrated with the lack of progress on all these issues. And I believe that Democrats, if they wanted to be successful, should go out and interview every single person who who voted for Bernie Sanders and then voted for Donald Trump. Why is that? How can that possibly be? Because of these very issues. They're frustrated, they're fed up, and they will go with whoever they think can bring about fundamental change, whether you're far right or far left, whether you're Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump.
Do you think most people are political? Right? We talk so much about how divided the country, and certainly the media capitalizes and monetizes it. But you live in Colorado.
Yeah.
Right? Take me to your state, to your friends and neighbors, to your neighbors that you haven't met yet.
Well, that's what's so striking is, you know, you watch cable TV and you hear the echo chamber and you hear about division politics, and you go out to, you know, in the mountains of Colorado in these little towns, and it makes you feel good about America. You're just like, well, wait a minute, there's such a disconnect with what we see. But also, in terms of the disconnect, Donald Trump will constantly say, stock market great, stock market great. Well, the consumer sentiment about the economy is the lowest that it's been in 75 years, basically since they've recorded. So you understand the K-shaped economy. So the people that, you know, and those are Donald Trump voters. That's his base. You know, the blue-collar voters are the ones that are getting screwed because they're not the ones that are holding all the assets in the stock market.